The old orphanage was on the edge of town, a place where the streetlights refused to shine and the shadows seemed deeper than usual. Everyone in town called it Shadow Home, and no one, absolutely no one, dared to go near it after midnight. For it was said that after the clock tower chimed 12 times, the sorrowful laughter of children could be heard echoing through the empty halls, along with the sound of tiny footsteps and whispers of their names. But one particularly dark night, two siblings who had just run away from home stumbled upon the orphanage by accident. The girl, whose name was Grace, whispered to her brother, Liam, "Did you hear that? It sounded like a child laughing." Liam, being the stubborn older brother, shrugged it off. "It's just the wind. You're just hearing things. Or maybe it was a cat," he said, trying to sound brave. But as soon as they stepped inside the orphanage, the old swings in the playground began to creak and sway on their own, as if pushed by an invisible force. A red ball rolled across the dusty floor and came to a stop at their feet. Both children gasped. They looked around, but there was no one in sight. Only the sound of their own breathing echoed back to them. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the building, making the windows rattle in their frames. Grace huddled closer to Liam, her eyes wide with fear. She felt a cold hand grab her shoulder and she screamed. Turning around, she saw an old woman with a vacant stare and a dress that looked like it hadn't been washed in years. Before either of the children could speak, the old woman opened her mouth and spoke in a voice that sounded like dry leaves crunching underfoot. "Who are you, and what brings you here?" she asked. They exchanged a nervous glance. Grace, unable to speak, shook her head. But the old woman, with a knowing look, turned and walked away, leaving them to follow her into the depths of the orphanage. Inside, it was even darker than outside, as if the building itself was trying to hide its secrets. Cobwebs brushed against their faces, and the only light came from the sliver of a moon that peeked through a hole in the roof, making the dust motes dance in the air. As they walked, the sound of children's laughter grew louder, mixed with the tinkling of a music box. Then they heard footsteps, little footsteps that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Suddenly, a group of translucent figures appeared before them, their laughter echoing in their ears. The children froze, unsure of what they were seeing. The ghostly children, noticing the siblings, stopped their game and stared back. One of the children, a girl with pigtails, floated forward and asked, "Are you here to play with us?" Her voice sounded like the wind chimes in the graveyard. Liam, trying to be brave, stepped forward. We don't want to play," he stammered, but the ghostly child didn't seem to hear him. She reached out a hand and beckoned to the other figures who began to swirl around the new arrivals. The music box sound grew louder, and the children started to sway, as if compelled by an invisible force. Realizing they were in danger, the siblings held onto each other tightly and closed their eyes. When they dared to open them again, the ghostly children were gone, as were the sounds of their laughter and the music box. The old woman from before stood in front of them, her eyes filled with sadness. "Don't ever come here again," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "These children are trapped here, and you almost became one of them." With that, she disappeared, leaving the siblings to find their way out of the orphanage. As dawn began to break, casting the first rays of sunlight into the old building, Liam and Grace stumbled out onto the street, shaken but unharmed. They never spoke of what they saw and experienced inside the orphanage, but the memory of the ghostly children and the haunting music box remained with them forever. And whenever they heard the wind whispering through the trees, they couldn't help but shiver and hold on to each other a little tighter. Hello, I'm here to tell you a story about a haunted house. The year was 1988, and the location was the small town of Galena, Illinois. A realtor named Grace was showing a home to a young couple named Liam and Anna. The home was beautiful, but it had one very strange caveat. The owners were asking for $42,000 less than the home was actually worth. Why? Because they had found out that the home was haunted. As Grace was giving Liam and Anna the tour of the home, she told them about the previous owner who had died mysteriously in the basement. She also told them about the strange occurrences that had been happening in the home lately, things like shaking beds, flickering lights, and the constant smell of fresh bread coming from the oven, even though no one had used it in months. As the couple continued to look around the home, they began to notice things moving on their own. At first, it was just small things like the rocking chair in the corner of the living room slowly started to rock back and forth, even though no one was sitting in it. Then the oven they had seen earlier turned on by itself, and the delicious smell of fresh bread filled the air. After a while longer, the couple decided to head down into the basement. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, they noticed a door that had been hidden in the shadows. They walked over and slowly pushed it open. Inside was a rocking horse and a little girl's bedroom set. It almost looked like the set was placed there just for decoration. And then, suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, Anna saw something. At first it looked like a shadow, but then it began to take shape. And when she finally got a good look at it, she screamed. Standing in front of them was a little girl dressed in what looked like a tattered old dress. Her eyes looked completely hollow and soulless. The girl stared at them for a moment without saying a word. Then, in a very soft voice, she said, "Would you like to play with me?" Grace, who had been listening nearby, finally found her voice and said, We're leaving soon." The girl tilted her head, and a smile slowly spread across her face. "It's too late. Once the game begins, it never ends," she said. As if on cue, the entire building started to shake violently. Then, the sound of children's laughter and cries filled the air. Liam rushed to the door and started pounding on it, screaming for help. But when he turned around, he saw that Grace and Anna had vanished, and in their place were dozens of children's shadows standing eerily in a circle around him. He screamed as he tried to run for the door, but it was locked tight from the outside. Then he looked up and saw the words, "Play with us forever," written on the wall in what looked like blood. When the police finally broke down the door to the basement, they found Liam's body lying on the floor. It almost looked like he had been dancing and suddenly froze mid-step. The officers searched the home but found no signs of Grace or Anna. To this day, no one knows what happened to them or why the little girl wanted to play with them. If you ask the locals in Galena, they will tell you that the home is still there and that sometimes at night you can hear the sounds of children playing and the smell of freshly baked bread. The next night, another pair arrived at the orphanage, Noah and Isabella. They were villagers. They had heard rumors about Liam and Grace, and came to find out what had happened to them. Where had the two children gone? What had happened to them? Had they just vanished into thin air? As the night wore on, Noah and Isabella explored the orphanage, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Then they heard a noise in the basement. It sounded like someone or something moving about down there. Curiosity overcame them, and they slowly descended the creaking stairs into the dark basement. In the faint light filtering through a grimy window high up on the wall, they saw it, an old wooden box in the corner. On its surface were strange carvings, pictures of children at play, and in the center, some words. "Never open, children's toys." A chill ran down Isabella's spine. She whispered to Noah, "We shouldn't open this." But he didn't listen. He lifted the lid. Inside were old toys, a cracked porcelain doll with a faded red ribbon in her hair, a broken robot with one eye missing and wires sticking out of its head, and a teddy bear its fur matted and stained a deep crimson red. It almost looked like the blood had dried in its fur. Noah picked up the doll, brushed off the dust, and suddenly she blinked. Startled, he dropped her. She landed on the floor with a soft thud. Then she spoke in a raspy, hollow voice. "Welcome back, children." Noah and Isabella screamed and jumped back. How could the doll move? How could she speak? Was she possessed by some evil spirit? The basement door slammed shut with a loud bang, plunging them into darkness. Noah panicked. What have we done? Isabella, though scared, was furious at Noah for not listening to her. She started to kick at the door, screaming for help, but their cries echoed unanswered in the vast emptiness of the night. Then the doll spoke again, her voice echoing eerily through the basement. "You shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have opened the box. Now you shall join Liam and Grace." More footsteps echoed in the darkness. Two distinct sounds, slow and heavy, like the dragging of metal chains. Noah and Isabella huddled together, terrified. The footsteps stopped right outside the basement door. Whatever was out there was taking its time, savoring their fear. Suddenly, the basement door burst open, flooding the room with a sliver of moonlight. A cold wind swept through, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Standing in the doorway was a tall, gaunt figure. Its eyes glowed an eerie green in the darkness. Noah and Isabella screamed again, but this time their voices were filled with a primal terror. They had never seen anything like this before. Neither of them had ever believed in ghosts or things that go bump in the night until now. The ghost stepped forward. It raised a finger, long and bony, like the finger of a skeleton. Noah and Isabella cowered, expecting it to touch them, to drag them into the darkness. But the ghost didn't touch them. It glided past them, its gaze fixed on the old wooden box. It reached out a hand, its fingers passing through the solid wood as if it were a ghost. Then it turned, its glowing eyes fixing on Noah and Isabella once more. It opened its mouth to speak, but no sound came out. It tried again, and this time its voice echoed in their minds. "Leave this place and never come back. If you do, you won't leave empty-handed." With that, the ghost vanished, leaving Noah and Isabella in total darkness. They didn't need to be told twice. They fled the basement, stumbling up the stairs and out into the night. They didn't stop running until they were far away from the orphanage. Back in the orphanage, the ghost returned to the box. It placed a finger on its lips, silencing the whispering voices within the wood. Then it vanished, leaving the secrets of the children's disappearance buried in the darkness of the basement. The night had been like any other for 10-year-old Noah and his sister Isabella. After dinner, they went to their favorite spot in the attic to play with their favorite toys. But tonight was different. Tonight, the toys seemed to have a life of their own. Suddenly, the rocking horse began to move on its own, and at the same time, the music box started to play a creepy tune. Then they saw it. The doll they had named Grace began to walk towards them. She was moving her arms like she was dancing, and as she did, her head twisted at an unnatural angle. "All our parents abandoned us," she said in a distorted voice. "Now you will be our parents." With that, the doll kept moving and repeating the same phrase over and over again. Startled by what they were seeing and hearing, Noah and Isabella tried to get away from the doll. But before they could do anything, the rocking horse began to move faster. Its speed picking up, it reared back on its hind legs and let out a loud whinny. Then, as if under some sort of control, it started to move closer and closer to them. Suddenly, the room was filled with a static-like distortion. And when the noise subsided, the two children saw their own shadows appear on the wall behind them. But something was wrong. Their shadows didn't look like their own. They were twisted and distorted, and it almost looked like they were reaching towards them. Then, as if emerging from their shadows, Liam and Grace stood up. They were no longer the cheerful children they had been moments before. Their eyes were wide and blank, and they were moving towards Noah and Isabella. But as they got closer, Noah and Isabella realized something even more disturbing. Liam and Grace weren't actually there at all. They were just their shadows, and their shadows were draining away from them. And then it hit them. This wasn't just a game anymore, this was something much more sinister. "Isabella, I think these are cursed spirits," Noah whispered, his voice shaking. "They're feeding off our life force. We have to get out of here." But before they could even try to escape, Liam and Grace were upon them. They reached out and grabbed their hands, and then they started to drag them towards the center of the room. "Let go of me!" Noah screamed. "Help me!" But his pleas were ignored. As they were dragged toward the middle of the room, they could feel their life force being drained away. It was as if the children were trying to suck the very essence out of them. Suddenly, Noah and Isabella were pushed to the floor. And as they looked up, they saw Liam and Grace standing over them, their faces twisted into demonic grins. Then, as if on cue, the doll, the rocking horse, and the music box all stopped moving. And the only sound that could be heard was the maniacal laughter of the two children. "It's too late," Liam said, his voice dripping with malice. "You can't escape now. You're trapped here with us forever." With that, he and Grace began to drain them, and Noah and Isabella could feel themselves being pulled into the shadows. They tried to fight back, but it was no use. The children were too strong, and they were being drained at an alarming rate. Just when they thought it couldn't get any worse, blood began to rain from the ceiling. The children just stood there watching them, their laughter echoing around the room. As Noah and Isabella lay on the floor, they could see their own portraits appear on the wall behind them. But in those pictures, they weren't alive. They were just smiling shadows. Then, as if they had rehearsed it, the two children spoke in unison. "Play with us. Play with us. Play with us forever." With that, they dissolved into the shadows, taking Noah and Isabella's life force with them. In the end, all that was left was the echo of their laughter and the portraits on the wall. The toys were silent, still, forever frozen in their game. the house was still, except for the sound of the wind whistling through the attic window. The only sign of the massacre was the blood staining the floorboards.